7 June 1938, Kykuit Estate, Sleepy Hollow, New York. The sun filtered through manicured gardens as servants polished the marble floors of Kykuit, the palatial home of John D. Rockefeller, Sr. The estate, spanning 3,400 acres and valued at $22 million in period dollars, was the nerve center of one of the world's greatest fortunes. Newspapers marveled at the Rockefellers' charity and art patronage, reporting the display of treasures beyond price in Kykuit's private gallery. Yet, hidden from visitors, a locked wing housed hundreds of paintings and artifacts, works traced by contemporary probate records and wartime inventories to devastated European collections. In the gilded light of the drawing room, a single family portrait captured their public legacy. Inside the gallery, a stock certificate for a European art shipping company hinted at murkier dealings. Few suspected that within a generation, questions of provenance and moral responsibility would shadow this immense collection. Kykuit's story begins on the muddy banks of Cleveland in the late 1860s, where John D. Rockefeller, son of a restless traveling salesman, filed his first partnership deed in 1863. Probate ledgers from 1870 show his net worth at $1.4 million, derived from Standard Oil's rapid consolidation, an empire founded on rebates and quiet market agreements. The young industrialist's business correspondence reveals a relentless philosophy: we must own it all, or not at all. As oil trusts multiplied throughout the 1870s, Rockefeller dined in parlors lined with imported velvet, the texture of new wealth pressing against old traditions. His first major real estate acquisition, Forest Hill, was registered in 1873 for $75,000, its deed preserved in Cuyahoga County records. By the late 1870s, the estate's payroll ledgers listed 24 full-time gardeners and cooks, their names carefully inscribed in company books. Morning light through the conservatory windows caught the gleam of newly installed marble, while the echo of footsteps in the Great Hall announced visitors from New York's banking houses. Annual income reports filed with Ohio authorities showed earnings exceeding $500,000, making the Rockefellers objects of both awe and suspicion. The Cleveland Plain dealer noted their growing isolation from former associates, writing that the oil fortune has built walls higher than any estate fence. On a summer morning, the estate registry recorded another land parcel purchase, while a new marble safe arrived, its lock gleaming under gaslight. By the 1880s, the Rockefeller name appeared in the New York Social Register, their entry confirmed by a calling card preserved in the archives of the Union Club. John D. invested $250,000 in constructing the first Kykuit house, with building contracts from 1893, detailing imported Italian marble and hand-carved mahogany panels. Architect William Wells Bosworth's blueprints, held in the Columbia University archives, showrooms designed for displaying art, wide galleries with northern exposure, reinforced floors for heavy sculpture. The estate ledger lists 38 staff members, including footmen dressed in livery ordered from London tailors. Society pages chronicled Laura Spelman Rockefeller's charity balls, attended by what Ward McAllister termed New York's 400, the city's most exclusive social circle. The New York Tribune described her 1885 reception as combining Midwestern warmth with Fifth Avenue sophistication, though private correspondence reveals anxiety about social acceptance. Behind the estate's curtains, accounting ledgers show rising expenses for entertainment and a growing reliance on legal trusts to protect family wealth from new federal taxes proposed in Congress. Trust documents filed in 1889 created intricate structures moving assets between family members and corporations. Each winter season brought new acquisitions: French tapestries, Venetian glass, marble statuary, recorded in household inventories with increasing vagueness about origins. In 1896, the butler's logbook notes a rare evening guest. J.P. Morgan arrived unannounced, bringing news of an impending financial panic that would reshape American banking. As the family fortune swelled to $900 million by 1913, according to federal inheritance tax reports, John D. Rockefeller Sr. turned seriously to art collecting. Auction house receipts from Christie's London office in 1902 list his purchase of a Botticelli for $2,200, routed through British dealers to avoid American import scrutiny. Correspondence with Paris dealer Joseph Duveen reveals discrete shipments arriving monthly, their contents described only as decorative objects in customs manifests. The sound of crates being unpacked in Kykuit's receiving hall became a familiar evening rhythm, while morning light revealed new paintings hung without fanfare. By 1910, the estate's galleries included Gobelin tapestries and Renaissance sculpture acquired from what insurance documents term distressed European estates. Household correspondence between John D. and his son mentions debates over provenance, with Junior writing, "We must consider not just legality, but propriety." Yet family trust documents filed that year clarify the patriarch's position. All acquisitions are to remain in the Rockefeller family trust in perpetuity, regardless of origin. The collection's rapid growth required structural modifications to Kykuit: steel beams installed to support marble statuary, climate controls added to preserve delicate pigments. Estate staff later recalled the particular silence that surrounded certain deliveries. On a cold December night in 1911, servants whispered as a crate marked simply "Rome" arrived in the moonlit courtyard, its handlers sworn to confidentiality by written agreement. The Rockefellers cemented their dynasty through strategic marriages that merged fortunes and social standing. Edith Rockefeller's union with Harold McCormick was announced in the New York Times on November 26, 1895, her dowry estimated at $10 million in securities and real estate. Marriage settlements filed with the surrogate court detail the transfer of Standard Oil shares, Chicago property, and sundry artistic properties valued at $800,000. The wedding at Kykuit featured imported orchids and a string quartet from Vienna, establishing patterns of magnificence that subsequent family weddings would follow. These alliances brought new collecting opportunities through European connections. McCormick family letters describe shipments arriving from Austrian estates, their owners facing bankruptcy after agricultural depression. Kykuit's expansion in 1912 included a west wing specifically designed for the growing collection, with receipts for old masters totaling $2.1 million by 1918. Construction records show specialized walls built to support massive gilt frames, while correspondence with architects emphasizes absolute privacy for the collection rooms. The new galleries featured double-locked doors and windows designed to prevent viewing from the grounds. Staff schedules indicate that only 3 servants had keys, their employment contracts including strict confidentiality clauses with financial penalties. In the newly built gallery, wall labels initially read, "From the collection of Count von Liechtenstein and property of Baron Rothschild," provenances that would be quietly erased from records in later years. According to a 1922 estate inventory filed for insurance purposes, Kykuit's restricted gallery stored over 200 paintings never included in public tours or charitable exhibitions. The documents list works by Rembrandt, Vermeer, and Caravaggio with notably incomplete acquisition records. Diaries of estate staff preserved in the Rockefeller Archive Center reference elaborate security protocols including armed guards and a direct telephone line to the Pinkerton Detective Agency. Monthly deliveries arrived by armored car from the New York Guarantee Safe Deposit Company. Their contents transferred at night to avoid observation. Receipts from Paris-based art broker S. Goldschmidt show transfers of $650,000 in 1923 alone, often for works described only as continental paintings, various. Shipping manifests indicate circuitous routes, paintings traveling from Vienna to London to Montreal before reaching New York, each transfer obscuring their origins. The sound of footsteps on marble grew softer near the hidden gallery, where thick carpets muffled all movement. Natural light was excluded entirely. Electric bulbs cast controlled illumination over frames that gleamed with old gold. Social observer Ward McAllister would later write in his unpublished memoirs, "Their real treasures were never seen, only whispered about over cigars at the Union Club." Insurance adjusters' reports from 1924 note discrepancies between declared values and market estimates, suggesting systematic undervaluation. On the fight night of the estate's annual Midsummer Gala, when Japanese lanterns illuminated the gardens and champagne flowed freely, A single door at the corridor's end remained locked, its contents known only to a handful of aging confidants. By the 1920s, John D. Rockefeller Jr. held memberships in the Metropolitan Club, the Union League, and the Knickerbocker, as confirmed by club rosters from 1924. These associations reinforced the family's legitimacy as cultural patrons rather than mere industrialists. Board minutes from the Metropolitan Museum note his election as trustee, bringing with him promised donations that would ensure the museum's expansion. Kykuit's annual garden party on June 12, 1926, reported by the New York Tribune, gathered 700 guests including ambassadors, senators, and what the Society columnist called the remnants of American nobility. But internal documents reveal careful reputation management beneath the social triumph. Board minutes from the family's charitable trust show strategic donations designed to deflect criticism of Standard Oil's monopolistic practices, with $5 million allocated to public perception initiatives. Rockefeller correspondence with public relations pioneer Ivy Lee discusses the art of generous distraction, using cultural philanthropy to overshadow business controversies. Letters between family members reference fears of social blackballing and the constant need to demonstrate respectability. John Jr. wrote to his wife Abby in 1925, "We must be seen as guardians of culture, not merely accumulators of it." The estate's public rooms displayed carefully selected works, American landscapes, portraits of founding fathers, nothing that might suggest foreign extraction or questionable acquisition. Meanwhile, household accounts show increasing expenses for collection management, including payments to European researchers tasked with creating retroactive provenance documents. After each gala, estate staff quietly counted the silver, an unspoken ritual born of recent scandals when guests had pocketed small treasures as souvenirs of their proximity to legendary wealth. Throughout the 20s, the Rockefellers refined their ability to disguise controversial acquisitions as acts of cultural preservation. Financial documents from 1927 detail the creation of the Rockefeller Foundation's Arts Division, ostensibly to support museums and artists worldwide, while transfer ledgers indicate that art purchases were routed through 4 intermediary companies before reaching Kykuit. The Metropolitan Museum's acquisition files note several anonymous donations of European masterworks that correspondence suggests originated from the Rockefeller collection, a way of enjoying ownership while avoiding scrutiny. Society pages celebrated Kykuit's 1928 open house for European refugee artists, with the New York Times reporting on the family's generous support for those displaced by political upheaval. But an internal memorandum discovered in estate files warns, several objects originate from contested collections, discretion essential in all displays and discussions. The document lists 17 paintings requiring special handling, their frames to be altered to remove identifying crests and inscriptions. The art room's double doors, depicted in architectural drawings from the period, were lined with Brazilian rosewood and equipped with soundproofing materials unusual for residential construction. Builders' receipts indicate the installation of a ventilation system separate from the main house, ensuring that no conversation could be overheard through the ducts. Even the flooring was specially chosen, marble that would echo footsteps warning of any approach. During the Depression's onset in October 1929, as fortunes crumbled across New York, a single portrait was quietly removed from view. Its subject, a Russian noble whose family had begun legal proceedings to recover assets seized during the Revolution. Letters from John D. Rockefeller Jr. to his son Nelson, preserved in sealed files at the Rockefeller Archive Center, reveal growing anxiety about inheritance and responsibility. "Our legacy is both gift and burden," he wrote in 1931. "What we have built must be protected, but also justified to a world growing skeptical of great wealth." Trust arrangement amendments filed that year cite changes in estate tax law, with assets shifted to newly formed family corporations domiciled in Delaware for tax advantages. The correspondence details a complex web of holding companies, Rockwin Corporation, Artco Holdings, Heritage Trust International, each owning fragments of the collection, to prevent any complete inventory. Club minutes from the Knickerbocker in 1933 note Rockefeller's unexpected absence from board meetings, with whispers of federal tax inquiries circulating among members. Private investigators' reports, commissioned by the family's lawyers, indicate that government auditors had begun examining art imports from the previous decade. Family letters grow increasingly strained as international calls for restitution of looted art intensify. Abby Aldrich Rockefeller writes to her husband about nightmares of paintings crying out for their true homes. The sound of lawyers' footsteps became as common as servants in Kykuit's halls, while filing cabinets filled with legal opinions multiplied in the estate office. Junior's diary from 1934 contains a revealing entry. The collection has become our captor rather than our treasure. On the morning of a crucial board meeting about the museum donations, Kykuit's art conservator received a confidential letter marked urgent. Do not display the Rubens this season under any circumstances. With Europe consumed by World War II, the international art market transformed into something darker than mere commerce. Rockefeller shipping records from 1941, subpoenaed decades later, list a series of antique shipments arriving from Lisbon, that neutral port where refugees sold treasures for passage money. Insurance documents value these shipments at $3.2 million, though descriptions remain deliberately vague. Various old masters, European decorative arts, historical paintings, unsorted. The crates arrived at night, their contents unpacked by a skeleton crew of trusted workers bound by legal agreements that survived in law firm archives. Art loss registers compiled by the Monuments Men in 1946 would later link several works found at Kykuit to paintings reported missing from occupied territories. A Vermeer that hung in the music room appeared on a list of works removed for safekeeping from a Dutch museum that never received them back. Family correspondence from 1943 acknowledges these uncomfortable truths obliquely. Certain acquisitions arrived under less than ideal circumstances, but we preserved them from destruction, Nelson wrote to his brother David. Publicly, the Rockefellers funded art recovery campaigns, contributing $2 million to efforts to return Nazi-looted works. But insurance documents reveal that their private collection grew by an estimated $400 million between 1939 and 1947, an expansion difficult to explain through legitimate channels alone. The estate's wartime staff was reduced to absolute minimum. Those who remained signed additional confidentiality agreements with penalties extending to their heirs. One rainy afternoon in 1944, a customs inspector at New York's harbor noted a crate with a false bottom in his log, though its inventory was never published in official records. The post-war years brought unprecedented scrutiny to private collections as international committees investigated the fate of Europe's cultural patrimony. Congressional hearing transcripts from 1952 reference prominent private collections of questionable provenance, with several committee members known to have visited Kykuit in previous years. The family's lawyers worked overtime, creating documentation trails that led nowhere conclusive, each painting's history carefully obscured through a maze of dealers, estates, and private sales. Insurance policies for Kykuit's collection, updated in 1953, show an extraordinary surge in stated value, reaching $1.7 billion in today's dollars according to estate documents. Yet public records list only a fraction of these holdings, the remainder hidden behind the legal structures John Jr. had established. Society pages maintained their glowing coverage of Rockefeller philanthropy, but a single columnist for the Herald Tribune wrote with unusual directness, "Not all treasures arrive by invitation, and not all collections tell the truth about their assembly." Club rosters from this period reveal subtle but significant changes. A denied membership renewal at the Knickerbocker, officially attributed to overcrowding, coincided with renewed questions about wartime acquisitions. The sound of whispered conversations followed family members through Manhattan's elite establishments. Federal investigators interviewed former staff members, their testimonies sealed, but their existence noted in FBI indices. In the estate library, paneled in English oak, lawyers drafted new trust documents, assets to be transferred offshore, records marked as attorney-client privileged, beyond the reach of any future investigation. As the 1950s advanced, internal family tensions over the collection's future erupted in carefully controlled conflicts. Nelson Rockefeller, harboring political ambitions that would lead him to the governor's mansion, wrote a confidential memorandum to siblings in 1957. Disclosure may imperil both family reputation and our charitable mission. We must act before investigation forces our hand. The document, discovered during estate reorganization, outlines a strategy of selective restitution, returning enough to claim moral high ground while preserving the collection's core. By 1960, Kykuit's household had contracted dramatically. Only 14 full-time staff remained, down from 50 a generation earlier, as verified in payroll records. The estate felt hollow, its vast rooms echoing with absence rather than presence. Private family meetings, described in diary entries by David Rockefeller, reveal fundamental divisions over preservation versus discretion. Some favored complete transparency, others absolute secrecy, most occupying an uncomfortable middle ground where selected truths might satisfy public curiosity. A Sotheby's auction catalog from 1961 lists 3 major paintings from a private American collection, their descriptions matching works previously documented at Kykuit. The sales generated $4.6 million, funds immediately transferred to Swiss accounts whose records would remain sealed for decades. Internal correspondence shows family members disagreeing about which works could be safely sold, those with clear provenance, and which must be returned quietly to avoid admitting their presence. At sunset, the old gallery's doors were bolted with new locks, and behind them, the weight of an unresolved legacy pressed on every echo through the marble halls. By the 1970s, shifting legal standards and public advocacy created unprecedented pressure for restitution. Court records from 1975 document the Rockefeller estate's negotiated return of several disputed paintings to European museums, each transfer handled through intermediaries to avoid direct admission of possession. The paintings traveled at night, their crates unmarked, their destinations recorded only in lawyers' files. A Rembrandt returned to Amsterdam, a Vermeer to The Hague, a Raphael drawing to Florence, each restitution accompanied by careful statements about the family's commitment to cultural heritage. Kykuit's public tour brochures, revised in 1978, made no mention of the restricted galleries that had once held the estate's most valuable and problematic treasures. Yet, inventory, records from the estate's conversion to museum status confirm that the hidden rooms were gradually, systematically emptied. Former staff members, interviewed years later for oral history projects, describe midnight departures, paintings leaving in unmarked trucks, destinations unknown to us. The marble halls that once echoed with footsteps now held only silence and memory. The transformation was both physical and symbolic. Walls that had hidden masterworks were removed, creating open spaces for public programs. The specialized climate controls were disconnected, the soundproofing removed, the separate entrance sealed. What remained was architecture without its darkest purpose, beauty divorced from the moral complications of its acquisition. In the final pages of a family ledger discovered during archival processing, a simple entry from 1976 speaks volumes. Return to rightful owner, Vienna, Herzog Collection. Today, Kykuit stands as a historic trust property, its official guidebook listing only acquisitions with verified, uncontested provenance. The estate hosts 40,000 visitors annually, each touring rooms where filtered sunlight illuminates American landscapes and portraits of industrialists who built the nation's infrastructure. The Rockefeller family's philanthropy endures through foundations, museums, and universities, bearing their name, institutions that have carefully distanced themselves from the collection's shadowed past. But in the stone corridors, physical traces of the hidden gallery persist for those who know where to look. Subtle variations in marble wear patterns mark where walls once stood. Electrical outlets placed unusually high indicate removed climate control systems. In the basement, sealed doorways hint at passages once used for discreet deliveries. The architecture itself holds memory that no renovation can entirely erase. A Rockefeller descendant, interviewed for a documentary in 2015, reflected with unusual candor. We believed in building for the ages, but nothing built on silence truly lasts. The paintings may be gone, but questions remain. Modern scholarship has traced several works from the original collection to museums worldwide, their labels now acknowledging complex provenance with phrases like restituted 1976 and returned to heirs 1978. In the hush of Kykuit's Marble Hall, where tourists pause to photograph gilded frames, only the echo of footsteps in a single empty frame in a corner room recall what once was hidden, a fortune in art that became a burden of conscience.